Back in the day.
I can meet you in the
Back in the day. We might have done it back then. But
Watch out for the short one.
We might have done it back then.
Look out for the short one.
Call the meeting order, please, Sam.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please. Hewitt? Here. Garner? Here. Wenzel?
Here.
Sorrell?
Here.
Howell? Here. Hoover? Here. Right, we're gonna make a slight change to the agenda and put Greg and Marty in between 5 and 6, so they can do their presentation quick. Other than that, if anybody has anything they wanna say, please sign up on the sheet up there. And at this time, we'll need a motion to approve the agenda.
Support.
Motion's been made and supported to approve the agenda. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Greg and Marty, you have the floor.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Wow.
Good evening.
Good evening, Marty. Thanks for having us. We thought we'd kind of jump in today. So we have some new faces on the board. Obviously, we've worked with the Finance Committee in the past. And our objective tonight is kind of give you a high overview of what's going on with Counts since we started working with the village back in 2012. With also some expectations of how we started and what our expectation of growth was in regards to the accounts that we have here. In front of you, before we get to that, let's kind of go back to 2012. Back in 2012, we met with the village. The village had quite a few accounts invested, not even invested, on deposit with some depository institutions. They were being charged some significant fees on a monthly basis for those deposits. And we met with them in regards to trying to take those deposits and utilize that money to generate income to really provide some relief in unfunded pension liability. Anybody familiar with what I'm talking about in regards to unfunded pension liability? Beautiful, good. So, obviously defined benefit plans are quite expensive, right? And obviously as board members, you know what that cost structure looks like. So to put these deposited accounts into a position to help generate revenue was our goal back in 2012. And at that time, we set out on a mission to help you guys generate some pretty good income. And in front of you, under income and expenses, is the complete history of this account in regards to income. Really, there's in regards to advisory expenses. You can see there are no advisory expenses inside this account. You have mutual fund investment expenses, which are built into the mutual fund itself. But over time, you can see this fund, and if you'll turn to, I'll help you with that, and page, let's get to, all the way to page 13 and 15. So if we go to 13 and 15, you can see there's a couple different values here. We have a dividend total, and then you have a portfolio total. So over the last 10 years, you can see this account has generated in income $348,206, plus an additional $15,000 in capital gains. Now, obviously, the account here is a relatively conservative account, right? So we don't have significant capital gains in that account. And in fact, at one point, we did have some, a couple different more aggressive funds that were more equity driven. But at that time, we met with auditors back, I want to say, it was probably 3 years ago, 3-4 years ago. We met with auditors, and auditors said that the investment plan that the village had did not allow for equity portfolios inside of it. So without a major change to your investment policy, those funds had to be removed. So at that time, we removed those based on the OMB's recommendation. That isn't to say that that can't be changed, right? If we look at the way the market is today, obviously there are some good value purchases out there, and it might be something that the board might want to consider with some of these funds. Not to say they have to, but it is an option if they so choose to. So the goal of this income, part of this income was always being reinvested. Greg, what was the amount the village was using to help pay down unfunded pension?
$2,200.
Thank you. So since 2012, the village took $2,200 of this dividend and then paid that down on unfunded pension liability to reduce that overall expense for the village, utilizing money that was costing them on deposit and changing that to provide them income. taking the remainder of those funds, and you can see if you go through all of these right here, you can see each one of the bonds, not only the income that they have produced and the dividends that were reinvested. And we continue to do that at this time to help to pay down unfunded pension liability. From a gain structure, net contribution to the account when we originally invested was $521,108. It has generated $152,968 in earnings over those same time, plus the dividends that we generated in income. So our objective here tonight really is just to help you as board members understand what we can do to drive down that expense structure, that unfunded pension liability, all right? So these are resources that the village has that are at their disposal. And our goal, again, is to generate as much income as possible, but capital gains are something that we can look at if the investment policy were to be changed at one point in time, okay? It's pretty simple, pretty cut to the chase. We'll talk just real quickly in regards to the market in general. Obviously, we know the Federal Reserve is continuing to drive up rates to try to stymie inflation. They are doing quantitative tightening at this time. We all have heard great news say quantitative easing, what that really means. A lot of people don't understand what quantitative easing is. Quantitative tightening simply means we're driving up interest rates to slow the money supply, right? And then they're reducing the balance sheet, meaning the Treasury has printed trillions of dollars over the last couple of years. Okay? They've loaned it to the Federal Reserve, so we've loaned it to ourselves. The Federal Reserve has then went and invested that money in mortgage-backed securities, U.S. Treasury notes, and some corporate bonds. And at this moment in time, the Federal Reserve is trying to get rid of the investments that they've made, shrinking money supply. That's the goal here. So in doing that, as the Fed raises interest rates, the current high yield income fund you have in here is paying a yield of 7.42%. That will continue to go up as the Federal Reserve drives up interest rates. Okay? So that's a good thing. However, teeter-totter effect, when interest rates are driven up, bond prices fall. They have an adverse relationship. They're like oil and water. They don't like each other. So we can see a devaluation of the value. However, we have more dividends going in, reinvesting, buying more shares. So as value comes back, the growth in the portfolio will come back faster. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, ask me questions. I'm totally fine with trying to explain it in a different way. Greg and I have worked diligently in regards to making sure that the portfolio themselves are not only monitored on a quarterly basis, but we utilize fiduciary services to make sure that the funds are performing in their peer group. We try to look for funds that are always in the top quartile. If they're not in the top quartile in their peer group, they should be removed, or at least have a conversation with the finance group to say, hey, these might be another option that we can utilize. We are using institutional share classes over time, which helps reduce expenses in regards to the mutual fund expenses themselves. So, two biggest hindrances on our money, inflation and taxes. So we need to make sure that we're watching for those two things. Inflation is hard to control at this time. So hopefully the numbers at the end of this week, right? Inflation numbers come out at the end of this week. We feel that the inflation number has peaked in May, or in April, and we believe that the May's drop to 8.3% will continue to decline ever so slightly. And I believe the Fed's tightening policy might shrink. I think the Fed might decide that quantitative tightening and reducing their balance sheet, they might slow that to make sure that the market does that soft landing that we all heard about, right? The Fed's idea of soft landing, so we don't drive ourselves back into the early 80s. Some of you kids weren't even born. That we don't have, you know, some of these kids that weren't even born.
Easy bus driver.
Yeah, right. So we don't have what we had back in the early 80s, where we drive up interest rates so high, and Paul Volcker drove up interest rates, and then we had, you know, fell right into a recession. So that's obviously what the Fed doesn't want to do. So, questions, please. We're both here to help in any way in regards to making sure that this makes sense and clear, and again, our objective is to continue to drive down that unfunded pension liability and help you guys make that decision with generating as much income as possible.
Maybe at the next finance meeting, one of these finance meetings down the road, we'll do it and we'll go through the actual Yeah, that and the,
If there's any
the
change,
deck.
recommendations
We
to
can take a look
change.
at that one.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
We just wanted to give you
Yeah.
an update
Yeah.
tonight to get everybody on the
Yeah,
same
for sure.
page.
I think as a board, it would be good from the finance committee, obviously, you know, from the school board, we do that too, for economy your committees. Bring that recommendation back. I think, you know, potentially as we see undervalued equities today, if there are some funds that we can generate more growth because of the undervalued situation that we see in certain areas, it might make sense. If the policy itself makes sense. So, we're more than happy to help you in those areas. Clear as mud? Awesome.
Thank you,
You
guys.
guys know that we're right downtown. I mean, you have Greg and I's cell phones. Anytime you guys have questions, it's not like you don't know where we're at. So, stop it. Anytime.
Next to that balloon place.
Yeah, right next to that balloon place. That's right, right next to the balloon place. Exactly. If you're angry, go into the balloon place.
So that's the other side of the barber shop.
That's right. If you're angry, go to the barber shop or balloon place. That's right. Exactly.
Or the brand new construction.
I don't know those guys.
No.
I
Okay.
don't know those guys. They're doing a nice job in that building.
Yeah, all right, okay.
All right. Well, good. Well, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, guys.
Yep, appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Get out of your hair.
Have a good one.
All right. Thank you.
Alright, moving on, public statement regarding current agenda items. Anybody? Okay, moving on into the consent agenda, need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Support.
Motion's been made and supported to adopt the consent agenda, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. No unfinished business, no new business, moving on into committee reports. Infrastructure,
No meeting.
finance amendment,
Yeah. The sum was, to move forward with this draft that everybody got. Everybody got this, right? Okay. There'll be an update. There'll be an update, but also this was the basic example, because this just says medical vehicles. Is there anything more important than that?
July 19th will be the published public hearing for that ordinance.
Next thing I heard is July 15th, but I wanted to check to see, I will be out of town.
I won't, but Tom will be there.
You want to cheat? You know, my wife. We're gonna go with this. The Clippings.
Alright, chamber, utility response, planning,
We should have a meeting on the 28th or 21st.
20.
airport,
No, we,
clear board.
Had 7 runs since the last date, bringing up to 78 runs for the year. The golf outing went good. The total we got was $8,706. There was a blood drive last Thursday and Friday, went good. Past weekend we had water rescue at the park. I don't know if anybody's seen it. Nick just posted some pictures on Facebook about it. We used the boat and used the new suits that was donated to us and tried them out, and everything worked good. They had somebody in the suit go out in the middle of the river, which is like 5 foot deep now in the channel there. They threw the disc out there to them, it's got a rope on it, and they learned how to throw it upstream above the person so it floats down to them. This morning and right now, we are having training with Tri-Township on our ladder truck. Tri wanted to have a training session on it so we can let them know how to use it. They make a rope, once one at the end of the month. So, you guys know that the hailstorm that went through, we found out that the roof on the fire department was damaged. We do have some contractors coming and looking at it. So that's going to be, it's only going to cost us $1,000 out of the pocket. All the rest of the insurance. And next one is gonna be search and rescue in July 10th and 11th. The next fire board is gonna be tomorrow night at 6 o'clock.
So, task force,
Task force met as the subject has been for almost 3 years, whether or not to continue having a task force. Dale wasn't able to be there this time, but he is looking for somebody to take on the leadership of that committee if it stays. The way we tabled it was that most of us had other things that were going on throughout the summer, and we decided to bring in Paul.
alright, moving on into public statement, 5 minutes, any topic. Shane, 5. No. Mike Navarre. Brandon Terry Kupas.
Under, during the work session, so what are you discussing?
He's gonna be presenting.
What change are people discussing?
There's never an open discussion during our deliberation.
And last time,
Oh, at the beginning, we can, yeah, you can talk.
If that's what you
well, but by that, I mean, you don't know what you're discussing it.
Get up.
Yeah.
Brett.
Aaron.
Okay. Deborah. Roger.
My name's Deborah Cutman, the attorney for Birch Run, and I'm running for circuit court judge. So just in your area, I wanted to introduce myself. There are 5 of us running this year for circuit court judge. The seat that is going to be filled is the seat that does all of the divorce, custody, and parenting time. Most of my opponents are going to tell you that they're experienced in family law, but I can guarantee you that I have the most experience in family law. I've been an attorney for 13 years, and 4 years previous to that, I worked for other attorneys. I have done family law. About 75% of my practice has been family law for those 13 years. I also do family law appeals. I do abuse and neglect cases in 5 different counties. I also do appeals in abuse and neglect cases. I'm also on Saginaw County Probate Court, Tuscola County Probate Court, and Tuscola County Circuit Court. They appoint me to be appointed as a guardian ad litem. If there's a custody dispute that is just too much for a 4 or 5 day trial, what they will do is they will appoint me. I will do an investigation, talk to teachers, counselors, get everybody's input, and then I will give the recommendation to the judge as to what I think that they should do for the custody and parenting time, properly applying all the law. It saves the court a lot of time by having someone like me make those decisions. I've got a lot of litigation experience. I am also on the Michigan Assigned Counsel in Saginaw County. I've been on there for 2.5 years. I do a lot of trials. I have litigation experience, both civil and criminal. And all of my pro bono work for about 15, 16 years has been with the military. I was going to Fort Custer and Camp Grayling and doing thousands of powers of attorneys and wills when we had deploying soldiers, when we were very actively sending them overseas. Now, Cooley Law School, unfortunately, has stopped that program, so what I've done is I've put myself on a list for the American Bar Association. When a soldier comes back to the Saginaw, Flint, Tuscola County areas, if they have problems with custody, parenting time, or divorce, I'm their gal, and I take care of the entire process for them, because a lot of people in this area don't understand military law and how these parties need to be compensated when their time is done and when they come back. Because Michigan has what they call change of circumstances. A lot of judges say, well, you weren't here for 3 years, but there are different things that you can do to apply military law to get them their parenting time back and to get them on an even foot with the parent that has had the children for all these years. So I do have cards, I have ink pens. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer your questions for you. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
And I know the Royce is at home.
My name's Jeff Lloyd. I've been resident in Chesapeake my whole life. Owned a business here my whole life. About 20 years ago, I was talking to my dad about running for county commissioner, and he didn't think it was a good idea being a businessman in town and running for county commissioner. Well, all my kids graduated. So I threw my hat in the ring. I'm running now for Saginaw County Commissioner, District 6. It'd be like Chapin, St. Charles, Brant, Chesaning, Maple Grove, and part of Elby. And I just want to introduce myself and let you know I was running. If we get some support, great. I just think that we'd like to have a little bit of voice down here in Southern Saginaw County.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, believe it or not, I'm even actually working for them already, and I haven't been elected yet. And Deborah, I'd like to thank you for what you do for our veterans. I really appreciate that. That is nice.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Chris Whistler?
101 Juicy Drive, if you each know that. The third thing, one being the numbers of marijuana growers, the second being the odor of marijuana. The third thing that I'm really concerned about is blight ordinance or lack of blight ordinances. And I'm wondering if you have that on your schedule of discussion, and when you're going to discuss it with the community, your village meetings.
Are you talking blight in general?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have an ordinance enforcement officer anymore, but
We do have an ordinance.
yeah,
You
we do.
do have an ordinance, but it is not
Yeah, we don't have it.
No
We
ordinance
don't have a
enforced.
person to enforce.
Say that again?
We have the ordinance,
Yeah,
but we don't have the person to walk around and enforce it.
right. So, do you have a plan for that?
We posted it.
Yeah, I can speak to it. I'm actually gonna mention it later. We have posted it and been able to fill it. Wage increases everywhere is making it difficult, so we talked to the finance and admin committee this evening, about raising the wage for that, and we're gonna re-advertise it, and hopefully we'll get some interest in it.
Okay.
Yeah, we need it. I'm with you.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, we do.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, council member statements. Okay. Village staff report. Chief Short?
I sent my report out earlier to council. I'll just kind of go over some of the stat highlights for the month of May. There's 93 traffic stops with 35 citations that were issued. We had one recovered stolen vehicle, one shots fired report that turned out to be unfounded, at least in the village. 5 suspicious persons, 9 suspicious situations. We had 2 people that were threatening suicide, 2 traffic crashes, 5 family troubles, 2 fraud reports. The officers did 16 follow-ups. And did you want me to go over the information I provided in the report? Does anybody have any questions on those situations?
Everybody good?
Can I get a list, updated list of, reservists at your meeting?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple highlights. In my operational report, I failed to mention, we're filling the utility billing clerk position. Received over 120 resumes for it, which is good right now. And we have 2 finalists coming in for interviews later this week, so we'll try that filled out later in the month. I already mentioned the ordinance enforcement officer. Did want to let the council know on a couple of recommendations I have for your consideration tonight regarding Country Boy Farms, and I just want to acknowledge the good conversations I've had with Nick through all of this, and the value that we have in that relationship with him. He's certainly, as a local community member and as a business, we're glad to be in partnership with him. There are he's asking for consideration to be able to get inside the fence and do some work in preparation of a potential approval of a special use permit. It would be everything short of actually planting cannabis in that fence. So that is a recommendation I'm bringing to the council for your consideration to approve. the agricultural activity, just like what would otherwise be allowed there, if it pleases the council. And the second recommendation I'd ask your consideration is to refund and waive the special use permit fee that he was paying for that. Certainly throughout all this, you're aware that his case was helpful in us identifying, irregularities and approvals through the years, and for something of a fairness and appreciation for his compliance with the zoning ordinance, I'd ask the council to consider waiving and refunding that amount. That the fine would still stand. This is only for the application fee for the zoning ordinance. So those are my two recommendations or requests for your consideration.
Anybody have questions about that? Make a motion on that?
Nick, what do you wanna do, prepare inside? What you gotta do?
I'd like to add, as far as the ground, still chisel plow field from Casasas, like to level it, run the water lines, get everything prepped, to be able to put the plants out after the planning commission. We have probably 10 days to 2 weeks worth of work that would really help us out, moving forward.
I make a motion to allow Country Boy Farms to do any agricultural work, run water lines. Does this include erecting a fence?
It's done.
Okay.
The state actually gave us full approval today. I got the email back that there's no requirement from VFS, that they were out yesterday and everything's approved upon your guys' approval.
James, did you ever get a copy of the lease from him?
You got the lease
Okay.
that helped define the land here. And the notices for the special use permit will be going out here this week.
We have a motion. Support. Motion's been made and supported to allow Country Boy Farms to continue non-cannabis related agricultural activities. All those in favor, signify by saying
With an
aye.
amendment, as well as waive $1,500.
Let's do that.
I was gonna say, I would do that.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Alright, so we've got a motion to do agricultural activities excluding cannabis activity. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alright, you wanna make that motion now?
I'll make a motion to waive the $1,500 fee for the special use permit.
Second.
Motion has been made and supported to waive the planning fee of $1,500. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alright. Anything else, James?
That's all I had, and I have to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for James? Okay. Moving on into work session. Does anyone in the audience have any comments before we begin? Okay, great. What do you have the floor, Mr. Wenzel?
For your convenience, to follow along. Fortunately, 2 pages this time.
You come around on the front and back.
Does everybody have one? Go this way. Okay, this is these glasses. Proposal for an addition to future ordinance or adjustments. Odor is defined as the quality of something that stimulates the olfactory organ. An odor is a chemical molecule light enough to be swept around by the environment. So under the topic of molecules, we need to look at diffusion. Diffusion occurs due to the random movement of particles. It usually happens due to a concentration gradient, meaning molecules move from high concentration to an area of lower concentration. And what factors affect the rate of diffusion? Concentration, temperature, mass of particles, and solvent properties. For my purposes, we will focus on the last one. Viscosity and density greatly affect diffusion if the medium that a given particle has to diffuse through is very dense. Then the particle will have a harder time diffusing through it. With this in mind, I would like to see an addition to our open grow facilities, as well as any possible future facilities, using an idea of a small berm surrounding the properties, as well as planting of a vegetative area. And by berm, I don't mean 6 feet in the air, I'm talking 1 to 2 feet to put the vegetative line in. Vegetative barriers, and any farmer in here understands these. Buffers can act in several ways to mitigate odors. Upwind vegetative buffers reduce wind speeds, create sheltered downwind zones, decreasing the spread of odors. Downwind vegetative buffers mix their air vertically, which enhances dispersion and dilution of the volatile organic compounds that produce odor. Downwind vegetative buffers also reduce wind speed, increasing deposition of odor-producing molecules and removing them from the air. Additionally, vegetative buffers act as living biofilters, retaining particles and absorbing and breaking down odor molecules. The degree to which vegetative buffers can reduce marijuana odor is unknown at this time. However, the odor-producing compounds of animal manure and marijuana appear somewhat similar in composition, structure, and mass, and the physical forces that produce turbulence and dispersion of particles are constant. Therefore, it's reasonable to conclude that vegetative buffers would also be effective in reducing odors from marijuana cultivation as they are used in farming. And just take a ride around our community and look at this in action in around multiple farmlands. Research shows that narrow planted vegetative buffers can be effective. Windbreakers are generally narrow, 1 to 2, 3 rows of trees wide. For example, rows of ingrown conifers provide a dense windbreak. Deciduous, did I say that right?
Deciduous.
Thanks. Trees, so I'm not saying the word again, are used in windbreaks because their leaves create significant surface area for trapping airborne molecules. Additionally, fall leaf drops can carry captured odor molecules to the ground where they are further trapped and broken down. Those trees and our shrubs should be considered as well. Listen, I still have problems with sawmills. This information was found in a study done by the state of Maine, as well as Oregon. The state of Maine would eventually make this a part of their rules for outdoor grows moving forward. Their conclusion was that if a setback area is cleared, rules should require the planting of a narrow, sufficiently dense and high vegetative buffer or barrier. Now, examples of the vegetative barriers using this style of tree, I can say, blue spruce, spruce, pines, as well as the other ones are ash, birch, elm, maple. So there's a selection of trees we possibly use or suggest. I would like to add that I have visited a facility that uses solid walls that seem to be mitigating odor as well. The walls are about 10 foot high, but the idea is that the odor is not free to just flow through like with the mesh screening walls and possibly forcing the odor up into the air where it would disperse. The walls were slightly raised to allow for airflow. I think they were probably 12 to 18 inches high, so allowed airflow, but on the other side, there's actual built up a berm that, again, forces it up when it comes through, because you can't have it just built to the ground and not let any airflow for plants. But in this place's defense, some of the walls were already in place, so they went with it and surrounded their entire property fully with them. Their first main concern was security, but it seems the bonus came with that the odor is broken down by those walls. This would be my suggestion moving forward, with the cooperation of the open groves to help mitigate the odor. As we understand, this could be an in due course to be determined, with this becoming an addition to our ordinance. With our current ordinance, that reads an outdoor grow means fully enclosed outdoor area that is shielded from public view, is equipped with secure locks and other functioning devices to prevent entry into the area by unauthorized persons. And I believe this concept of possibly combining these two ideas going forward will provide a more secure area, as well as also aid in making the perimeter of these businesses look more appealing over time, rather than just seeing a mesh fence. The end.
I'm suggesting, Madam, that it would be an either or, like either they build the walls or put up a berm.
I would suggest the combination of both. And by that I mean certain properties, at a certain point, you can no longer expand. So why not have a solid wall? As well as the trees, because you're never going to have to replace that area. But on a side where you may want to expand, that would be up in the air. But everywhere you can't expand, I would suggest one or try to use both. Because we want to mitigate the odor, we want to try to slow it down, we want to try to reduce it. Now, again, this was a study I looked up in the state of Maine, and they decided, it's in our rules, if you want an outdoor grow in Maine, this is what you got to do. So, I don't think it's a bad suggestion. I wouldn't say it would be something I would say you got to do right now, it has to be over time, but it's just a suggestion. And again, it would make it look, we drive down the road and there's weeds and all kinds of stuff in front of one of those mesh. If there were trees, you'd have it lined with pine trees or something. It's just going to look better.
To be forced to be maintained at that point too.
And using those trees is going to take care of the odor.
Okay.
No, it will. That's
Well,
the science.
I believe you, I just know that some people will disagree.
Well, then some people can look it up.
I understand. I just know there won't probably come a day when everybody says they can't smell.
You're never going to eliminate
No, I think
outdoor
we're trying to reduce it and send it further up into the atmosphere to disperse before it gradually works its way back down. The higher it goes up away from ground level, the more it's going to disperse as it's falling. So I agree. I think it can significantly reduce.
So I get, you say once they've reached the place where they can't grow any larger in that area, but other than hitting the village limits, at any given point, if the property comes up for sale next, then, like, when would we want them, when would we say, okay, you should build a wall? That's what I'm saying.
I'm not saying they have to build a wall. This is just a suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, this is just something that's being put on the
But
table.
again, any of the businesses currently in the village limits, they're running out of space to expand anyhow. If you make your decision, this is it, all right, try to incorporate this. You're going to look better. It's going to help reduce the odor. If you can't expand anymore, work with us to make your business look better from the outside in instead of people just driving by. Everybody can look through the green mesh, unfortunately. But the rule says as long as that's there, you're good. But why not make it look pretty?
Well, if it's one, updating appearance and making it look not so run down, and two, it eliminates the visibility aspect of being able to see through the green mesh, and three, if it helps to reduce significant odor, I mean, we have 3 bonuses there.
Yeah, and even if the mesh is there, if you have a tree line.
And saplings, though, how long does that mitigation time take?
We're talking about, if people are using the conifer trees, blue spruce, whatever, they grow a foot a year.
You're gonna wanna use something that has a more tight needle base, so I think
Right.
anything in the spruce family is probably your best idea. However, spruce tend to die out at the bottom, working their way up over time, so you would probably have to do some type of staging in there. I don't think it's impossible to figure out a happy, well, just to find trees that will support what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I'm not saying put a sapling of an oak tree.
we're not gonna.
That's not gonna
come
do
on,
it.
tree it.
Well, I'm trying to think, when we're talking about elevation, what the turnaround time is, and then also the upkeep of this tree, so a tree dies, or it's hit by a car,
Do we have to
or
repair it?
whatever, what's, we'd also have to look at maintaining and maintenance of those trees so that they can mitigate.
Yeah, there's definitely some schematics that would have to be worked out. We would probably recommend a certain height of tree going in. Obviously, we're not calling up the DNR and looking for seedlings to put in. You'd probably want to start with a 10 to 12 foot tree right out of the gate. So those are all schematics that would have to be worked out along the way if this is something that the council would be interested in adopting.
If I may, I can speak to a few of those things. It might be good to share that white paper from Maine because it is informative. And they speak to the remarkable similarity between odor-bearing molecules of manure and cannabis having similar properties. And these vegetative buffers have been used in agricultural practice for a long time. There's some science behind it to demonstrate, no, it is not perfect, it does not eliminate all things. But they do work. They do help force the air upward where it dissipates more quickly.
Well, and I think if you get a 2 foot berm around, you got a 4 foot tree, you're 6 foot in the air now. So maybe you don't have to start with a 6.
Well, it'll come down to cost because the more mature trees start with more expensive it gets. And as you have, Tom is looking into this to try to identify all the potential species. Because you're going to want to diversify species too. Yes. You don't want some bug coming in and killing the whole thing.
No, and you want species that are native here to Michigan, and you don't want anything that's going to be invasive. There's many things, like I wouldn't put an ash or an elm in there. Elm's not a very strong tree. Beech are incredibly slow growing, so I don't know if I would put one of those in there either. But obviously maples, that's also probably going to be an issue at some time when they drop pucks and you have sugar maples growing all over your property. That's probably not going to be conducive. But there's plenty of trees that I think that we could figure out. These are just examples.
Yeah, in practice, I imagine this falls into a category of your ordinance says something along the lines of licensed facility at each year renewal, thou shalt submit a report on your odor mitigation plan. What has happened in the last year, what you've done, what your plan is, what your long-term plan is, what you're committing to do in the next year. So you're not necessarily writing in the ordinance. You have to put these trees so many feet apart around this. No, it's putting the onus on them to submit an odor mitigation plan that we then review and agree with following practices like this. And if there's ever any doubt or question, it comes to the council on whether you think what they propose to do in this space is acceptable. That way you don't have to try to write the ordinance to it. We may come up with standards, in-house that are helpful to help them come up with a living plan, but just so you know what it might look like in ordinance form.
Anybody else have discussion on this topic?
I think it's fair to say the biggest concern for the facilities is going to be cost. And you look at phasing that over time, or how do you?
I agree. I mean, it's whatever. It's a valid point. It just depends on what we're going to do.
Every odor mitigation is going to have cost.
Yeah.
Is there a recommendation of how many trees per so many feet, or
That's part of what we're doing research on. What is the best practice for how many rows and how many and what kind of species? I think there's work to be done there. And then imagine doing that around large lengths of fence, and it'll add up. So the phased approach of giving them time to implement that is probably more realistic.
I got a question back there.
I hear all the comments, and I understand how.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, my name's Dave. I'm from Trident. Had no idea this meeting was going on tonight. I was just bored. found out you guys were having a meeting, haven't been here for a long time, so I just decided to come and hang with Nick, and now I'm hearing everything going on. So all I have to say out of the whole thing is, there's 50 states in America, and one has an opinion. It's not a very good ratio, 50-1. So the odor, I always hear the odor. You guys were out at our farm in 2019, 2020. No one smelled the odor. 2021 had 8,000 plants. You stood on the property, you walked the property, nobody complained about the odor. That was September. Okay? So now Michigan is getting ready to pass a law that says you can grow hemp plants all across Michigan, hundreds and thousands of acres, turn those hemp plants into THC. They smell the same, they look the same, they act the same, they're the exact same plant that I'm growing, which has THC in it. If they grow the hemp plant, and Michigan's going to pass this law, everyone in Michigan that wants to grow hemp right next to you, you have no control over. Zero control. Yet, we're complaining about small little farms that you want to increase the fence line because somebody doesn't like the looks of it. Me personally, I think a 10-foot block wall will look like a prison. If you want a bunch of prison-looking compounds around here, well then you have to vote for prisons. And if you want to plant a bunch of trees because you think it's going to cut down the smell, well, if you came to my farm in the end of September and you couldn't smell it, I'm confused of why everyone talks about the smell. So if you guys are going to make an ordinance like this, I invite everyone in this room to come with a smell detector in September and tell me what you really are talking about. Because a pig farm stinks, but a marijuana field has very little odor in it when it's in the open air. And if you want to plant all these plants and bring everything to the marijuana grower, then think about this. Last year, who had the best outdoor crop in Chesney? Better yet, I'll tell you who had the best outdoor crop in the state. We did. And the prices of oil went from $19,000 a liter, and they're down to $3,500 a liter now. So keep throwing more cost at us, and we won't have any money to do the outdoor grow. And if that's what you guys are looking for, well then we're heading in the right direction. Because I'm standing here today with the best outdoor grow in Michigan. Now, I'm not the one saying that. The state of Michigan said we had the best outdoor grow in the state. I haven't put one penny in TriMed's pocket, and today is June, 6th or 7th. Not one single profit from last year is in TriMed's pocket as I stand here today. So what more cost you want to keep throwing? Because if the prices go down, they won't be growing next year anyways. Because the price is dropping. Everyone's illegally bringing stuff in from California. I think everyone's smart enough to know how all that crap works. We do everything legal. And we compete with everybody that's in the black market. And it's a dog-eat-dog thing. Nick can tell you that. You know, last year what he was getting for his medicine, he's less than half this year. So I know we're all farmers, and I know that the price of beans and the price of peas and corn goes up, it goes down. But if it goes down too far, the farmers aren't going to grow anymore. And, you know, it's just the way it works. You could put berms up and anything else you want to put up, but what are you really accomplishing? One state out of 50 said that they have a smell ordinance, but yet I've had presidents at our place, city managers at our place, dozens of people from Chesney at our place in September. Now you cut down the plants in October, so if it ain't smelling in September, it ain't smelling. So I invite you all to come out in September and really see what it really takes to do this. Because, you know, it's real easy to look at Maine and say, this is the golden goose of America. but is it real? It's just one opinion from one state that came up with one rule and regulation. And by the way, on the East Coast, they get a fortune for their stuff. In Michigan here, that isn't the same thing. We're getting down to Oregon's medicine and Colorado's medicine. In California, for that fact. A liter of oil in California sells for $1,000. Why do you think they're bringing it to Michigan? So, just wanted to bring all that up for you because, you know, if you really want to see how something like this does, then put your boots on and come on out and see it at the time that all this is going on. Because if you don't do that, then you're just listening to someone's opinion. And we all know how people have opinions. Right or wrong, they're allowed to have them. This is America. Anyways, Dave from Trident.
Anybody else have information? Questions?
I have something. Denise Sealy Navarre, 305 South Line Street. Dave, good speech. I sat on the Planning Commission from 2013 to January of 2020. I sat on most of the sites for the marijuana grow facilities. I was there at meetings. I read all the information that they had to give. Technically, in Planning Commission and in sites, we have, and we're supposed to put in recommendations for landscaping, berms, etc., to mitigate certain aesthetics, be it odor or visual aesthetics. We never really pushed for marijuana ones, which is fine. But as far as odor, it was in our ordinance about odor. Y'all said, this is me being vernacular, y'all said that we were going to combat odor. You would not smell it. So now this is their chance to correct the mistakes or improve upon the ordinances because somehow there are complaints. So I'm just throwing it out to you. We have it in our sites plans. It should be in the site plans when it comes to Planning Commission. We have it in our articles that guide this Planning Commission. Why this was never put into place. Berms are usually by the village rules between residentials and businesses. So I'm just giving you a heads up on that. So, and trees, we do have a list of trees that are not permitted in the village within our ordinances or guidelines, whatever you want to call it. There is a list of trees that we cannot plant.
Most of them are deciduous trees.
Most of them are fruit bearers or certain ash and elm trees, which
walnut, mulberry, things like that.
Yeah. So as far as odor and coming down, we did promise the residents of this village that we would take care of it back in 2016, 2017, etc., 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 with every new site. So if we have to mitigate it now and turn up a few carts and make some business owners unhappy, I really don't care. We need to be committed to what was promised to us by these businesses and what we promised the village residents, be it site plans or ordinances.
Are we allowed to talk?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe it don't stink inside of Eden Way or Country Way Farm, but on the day when the odor is strong, when I have a man delivering furniture to my house and he says, "Whoa, what is that smell?" and I'm a mile and a half away, the odor's there. It's full of baloney, there's no odor. Either that or you're so smelling of marijuana you can't smell the marijuana. There's odor. We drove by Highlight tonight on our way here and there was odor. There's odor coming out of these places and it needs to be controlled. It's not fair for the neighbors, and Mr. Foster was here multiple times last year until he felt beat up and gave up. He was getting sick in his yard from the odor, and he's directly across from Eden Way. The poor guy said he had to go in and lay down because he was passing out from the odor. I had like an asthma attack as we drove through there when the odor was really strong. The one time and we had the windows closed on our vehicle. There's odor. All of you have to agree there's odor.
Go ahead, Nick.
Nick Weisenberger, Country Boy Farms, local resident. I got a question for the board, and I got a question for every resident from Chesnee. 2017, our town was in shambles, falling apart. Hands down, does anybody disagree to that? We opted in to take cannabis into our community to repair that, correct?
Yes.
Because we had so many empty businesses, empty buildings, empty everything, correct?
Yep.
No infrastructure, no anything. Jesse used to carry 1,000 to 2,000 more jobs. We carry that again now. So as locals of the community, what's your answer if you run us out of business? Dave, I, everybody else, you have all these vacant structures. What do we want to do then? What are you going to bring next? My question of it is, amongst all the upset residents, as a local, that my kids go here and I'll do anything for this community that I possibly can, what's your answer to replace what it's done for your community? So if you ain't got an answer to replace, in my opinion of a local, you don't get an opinion of, I don't like this because of this. What's your next? We've looked at in Chesnee the big infrastructure. We're a half hour from 27. We're a half hour from 75. What are you bringing here? Nothing. So we end up with more vacant structures. Farmer Pete's ends up vacant again. Tuscarora ends up vacant again. All the development on that side of town ends up vacant again. What's your answer with all of it? Or do we accept that our town is striving and moving forward?
No, I'm sorry. That's.
No, everybody gets one. We're not gonna go back and forth and fight. I'm not doing that.
But that's making
No,
an excuse.
no.
I'm not making an excuse. I'm a resident that loves this town.
Everybody can say one.
Phase
Stop.
plan was putting up all these things
Order.
that happened.
Please stop. Everybody gets one. We're not gonna fight back and forth. I'm not doing it. Anybody else have anything they wanna say? Mike, come on.
I just have a question from earlier. There was a fine and a fee, right?
Thank you.
And they excused the fee, right? And
Yes.
they kept the fine?
Correct.
Which was greater?
It'd be the fee.
So they used savings from the fee to make the fine useless.
Well, the trick is that we also screwed up. Like, we weren't monitoring it, so we basically waived that fee because they have to go back through the process again. So in the future, we've got to revamp it so that we make sure we get ahead of it, and that's what he was talking about. Cool?
It's an answer.
Yes, it's an answer. Anybody else? Okay. Council, where are we at? How are we feeling? Do we want this to move on to the next step?
To be clear, this would be something like yearly when we look at renewals, that we would sit down with the company and say, what is it you guys can do this year? Not forcibly saying you have to do this, trying to work with them and find out what can be done.
There's a few ways you can do it. I would envision it that every year when a license is up for renewal, there are things they have to submit to us. Included in that would be their odor mitigation plan. Say, what happened the last year, complaints, issues, failing efforts or whatever, and what the long-term plan is and what they're still committing to and what they commit to in the next year to do to move towards that long-term plan. And that, from that perspective, something like this, if the council's agreeable to allow it to be implemented over time, that's the type of thing we'd be reviewing for. We'd look at their mitigation plan, we'd say, are they making sufficient progress toward the long-term goal of seeing vegetative screening in these areas, burning, what have you, and their renewal is approved on the basis that they've committed to a plan and they're making progress towards the plan we all would agree to.
And would their income take into it, like, would we take that into account? Like, if they're making enough money to do a more significant amount of work,
it becomes difficult to try to govern and regulate, because then what we become auditors of the books. I think you decide what is a reasonable amount of time, depending on what kind of costs might be involved, with which you might give them to implement. And just try to make a good faith effort. It may be that some sites may require more than others, and so you give them longer than others. And you're sort of maybe taking into account what's happening out in the marketplace, but not necessarily trying to audit the books.
I know that I heard that Grady Council put in their ordinance that have consumers contact them for anything over 20 amp service. 200 amp, I'm sorry. So if somebody buys a house in town, they put a 600 amp in there, they gotta notify us that there's a 600 amp. You know that's something's going on there. So that might be one thing we want to look into. And the ordinance that consumers notify us if there's any houses in town that's going to be put over 200 amp services in. And another thing on the smell, I know that on mine you smelled it a little bit the other day, but we can't see where it come from. But you got people growing plants on their own too. So it's going to be hard to find out where all that smell's coming from, even though Tom's got the detector. And once you highlight the third detector, then too, you can get that data. It's one or more.
I think this is a good idea for a plan to work with. I just don't know about time frame and how much to require.
Even if we don't require this large of a plan, I mean, we gotta do something on some of the properties. Even just coming out Main Street, excuse me, on Eden Way, it just looks like trash on Main Street. I agree with Denise, there were implementations that were supposed to happen with making things look aesthetically pleasing. I think I beat that horse to death over on the properties on the curve. I'm trying to figure out a way to block them as you're coming into town. Even if we don't go this route, I still think we need to do something in terms of forcing some of the facilities to clean up the outside of their property that faces the public.
I do like this. I don't know that it will make enough of a difference to the people that are having an issue with odor and like for another several years. So I'm not sure if it's the answer. Or, I mean, it is a good answer. I do like it. I just don't know how to implement it to make it.
That's why I asked about, are we talking about putting it in saplings or you write an ordinance, the requirement is they be more mature than that. I think those are some of the, like, semantics that have to be worked out. I think a fuller grown tree, I don't know, I would be curious to research that. So with some security along those fence lines, I think some of that is lacking as well. And I would think any type of beautification would also be an asset to the business.
I do like the idea of it having being something that we incorporate once a year when we sit down and look at renewal of licenses and see what can be done to better those businesses. Like you said, we're not going to be able to turn around and do this all overnight.
Correct. I think that was kind of the idea, a slow.
I do like
And I guess for clarification, when you talk about, is this something we're interested in moving forward with? What does that forward movement look like so that people are clear?
So please vote to move forward on it, and we'll go back to the committee that brought it, and start getting the language together. They go to planning, finance, and then finally back to us, go to it again, then do the public hearing.
So this would be an ordinance change for new businesses coming in? but a plan of action for the future for businesses that are already here.
Yeah, just clarify my understanding, there's a number of these ordinance provisions that the council's gonna be considering here in the next little while. We're gonna get them all together in one draft revision and look at them all at once, or, yeah, that's what, so the idea here would be, is the elements of this, what you'd like to see in the next final draft version of an ordinance amendment, so that it can be written into it. Because if there isn't council support for going in this direction, we don't want to waste our time on it.
Well, if that's already on the planning commission, why wouldn't it also be done for current businesses? That's what you were just saying.
I was just saying that I could see it the fall where it's gonna take years, even if they went out and put trees in right now, it's gonna take years before it's mitigating. Before it's really mitigating over, that they've grown enough to do their job, but I also understand that that's a large cost for somebody, so. I do like the idea that that's once a year we're looking at what they're doing, but we need to make sure the public understands that this is not gonna be a turnaround for tomorrow for the overtime.
And it is sort of the crux of the issue. I mean, this has been a debate all along, because any odor mitigation is going to have costs, has been acknowledged. It's not going to perfectly eliminate odor. So then becomes the question, is the cost that is having to be borne for this, the cost benefit, is it going to be worthwhile, or is it still, there's still going to be lingering odor that you wish you hadn't required it? Nobody can crystal ball that, but it's part of the calculus I'm assuming you're all doing, is deciding whether it'll have an impact.
I think it'll have an impact. The odor will never be completely gone. It's impossible. Someone is going to still smell it.
Is the proposal then that this only come into play for new businesses or for those already in existence?
I believe it was all.
All.
Yeah.
The suggestion was for all.
I do think it would be a good idea to put it in the ordinance as a requirement for any new businesses, that they start out with knowing they needed to have these barriers. That we worked it in with the businesses that are already here for the long term.
I'll make a motion to have it carry on.
Can we still work on this as we send it along? If we find more information or alter the information as we're working with it?
This is just to keep the general idea moving along.
So it could be squashed later on if we decide that.
Yeah,
Okay.
kill it later.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea to carry it along. We could probably do some more work on it, or I'll do some work on it too. This is mostly Keith. And all his downtime. You no, I mean, one way or another, I would like to see something along this line implemented. I mean, just in terms to clean everything up too. I mean, it doesn't all look great.
I think Sean had a question.
I do, I just didn't want to make a motion before I had a chance to ask.
Sure.
So for the existing businesses, is there a way we could potentially, kind of like a tax rebate or a tax waive, is there a way we could help offset or complement those with maybe a license fee or something to help mitigate or help spur the interest of complying with the cost? I mean, is there any way we could do a give and take?
It's in the art of the possible. You have to take a creative attorney to write it that way. And that's a good policy question you might want to debate.
Well, no, and that's why, again, it's just.
You could do it. Yes.
I mean, we give like tax breaks to GM and everybody else who comes in this town, or well, Michigan. So is there just a way to potentially incentivize, there we go, and mitigate some of the costs?
Yeah, what you charge for your license up to the maximum is your discretion. If you have different you're basically saying you'd be having different license fees for different facilities based on that might be a little fuzzier, but you could potentially do it in order to help incentivize them in making the investment.
Okay, and it's a blanket question, it's
Sure.
not necessarily a pinpoint, just the concept that it is something that could be discussed.
Do we know if every current business has the space available to post these types of trees? Remember?
They do not. So, well, at least in the front. I believe we were talking about, like, the front part that faces Main Street there. There's not enough room for a Burman tree. So that's, like Keith was talking, a hybrid. So there's a solid wall there, and on the sides there'd be trees.
I'm walking around that.
Yeah.
We would have to take into consideration, you know, a 10-foot wall on Main Street where it faces the river and not necessarily any people. What would that even do any good there to mitigate the snow? Because the wind doesn't typically blow from the east into the west. And there's no people there. I mean, I definitely think that there's bugs to work out of it and some other things to consider along the way. I think we can keep working on it and tacking it away, but I'd like to keep it at least on the idea wheel.
Make a motion?
I'll make a motion to keep it on the idea wheel. I make a motion to, is there a name on this, Keith? Proposal for.
Put a name? Oh, in my computer it says barriers.
Okay.
Not a sheet of paper.
I make a motion to move along, Keith's proposal for, odor reducing barriers.
Support. Motion's been made and supported to have this continue along the discussion for odor barriers. We'll do a roll call vote, please.
Hewitt?
Yes.
Beaky?
Yes.
Warren?
Yes.
Wenzel?
Yes.
Over?
Yes.
Chanel?
Yes.
Powell?
Yes.
Thank you. Is that it, Keith?
That's it.
All right, thank you. All right, at this time, we're going to go into closed session, so we'll need every non-council member to be absent. And there will be no decisions made.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session.
8:45.
Support.
Motion's been made and supported to enter into executive session at 8:45. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We are adjourned until 8:45.
Next time, you cigarette, let's go.
Regular session. Is there any other comments or discussion we want to have now in regular session?
I think Brandon Township's got that in their ordinance about the amps and that.
I don't know if that would have to be an ordinance. I think we could.
It's in their ordinance that consumers, because they had to send that ordinance to consumers. To show
get
them.
consumers to
Notify them.
Oh, okay. So consumers just doesn't volunteer the information.
Gotcha.
I mean, I think it's interesting, I just don't know what we can do with that.
You'd be
Like, it's
surprised
not
how many
against- I understand what you're
houses out
saying, but
Brandon
it's not
Township
against
now.
the rules for them to
It's
get
got
so much
600
electricity, so they're not.
600 amps.
You know, as soon as they
What would
pay
you
that
do with
power
that?
bill for a few months, they're gonna stop doing that. Because
Well, the thing is too, is that the federal government still got that in the Senate for taxing marijuana and taking it off the marijuana off the illegal drugs. So that's gonna hurt these guys too once they get the federal tax on to them.
Right. You mean the fake one that Nixon put in? But I don't
No.
know.
Well, and federal deregulation is also going to impact
Yep.
whether you even grow it in Michigan. Is this the best place to grow it?
Right.
Because then it could be
Yeah, once you can take it across state lines, it changes the game. California is the place. Well, maybe not California either. 'Cause
None of water there, yeah.
Yeah,
But
I
there
just
is
took a
definitely
hit. I
southern
said that
states.
email again.
There's
California is taking the last quarter took a huge hit. Nobody's making money. Now, on the other hand, in that email, Illinois is raking in the box right now for some reason, but
Well,
I
it's
think
just
they
gonna keep
just got
moving south.
started, so. Right.
Where the growing seasons are longer and they're plentiful
Well,
with
you
water.
also got Chicago.
Well, yeah, but
Growing it in high
they don't have a
rises.
gun problem as well, so.
Sure they don't.
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
Motion's been made and supported to adjourn. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Okay. James, do we have an updated report on this?
Oh.
Did you send that and I blatantly ignored it?
Sam, I didn't have your email, and I'm gonna tell you that